Our next speaker is Dr. Merlin Sheldrake. Many of you already know his New York Times bestseller book, Entangled Life, How Fungi Make Our World, Change Our Minds, and Shape Our Futures, a much discussed book. He received a Ph.D. in tropical ecology from Cambridge University, and he's a research associate at the Vrije University in Amsterdam. And today, he wants to bring together constructively Whiteheadian metaphysics and fungi and networks of fungi. Fungi or fungi? I don't even know. It's fungi? Yeah. So, networks of fungi, and interpret those with an Whiteheadian metaphysics. And I'll find that very intriguing, and I'm waiting for your talk.
Well, thank you very much. It's really great to be here. And I love Peter's idea of the metaphysical menu. I wish that those entering their training in the natural sciences were offered a metaphysical menu. I think often of Whitehead's line, something along the lines of, when scientists say that they don't like metaphysics, what they mean is they don't like their metaphysics being questioned. Metaphysics is not an option. We all must have a ground of being. We all have a world view. So I'm going to talk to you today about a collaboration. This is a collaboration between me, playing the part of a fungal biologist, and Matt Seagal, who's here in the room, playing the part of a process relational metaphysician. This is a dipolar project. I'm the biological pole, and Matt is the metaphysical pole. This is an open-ended conversation. It is in process. It is very much in exploratory mode, and we don't know where it will go. And if we do this correctly, that will remain the case. So in short, we're wondering whether it might be possible to glean some metaphysical lessons from the study of fungi, and in return, whether fungi might be gateway organisms for a return of process relational thinking to the biological sciences. There is a rich history of process relational thinking in the biological sciences, as we'll all know. I think particularly of the real rich period, the Theoretical Biology Club, Waddington, Woodger, Paul Weiss, and others. But it was marginalized by the Neo-Darwinian orthodoxy, and I think Matt and I both feel like this is a ripe time for a renewal of process relational thinking within biology. This collaboration is also a symbiotic interaction. I think this is a helpful framing. I study ecology. I study the ways that organisms relate to one another. And within the ecological sciences, and particularly when we think about microbial life, it becomes very clear that there's no such thing as an individual. Life is symbiosis all the way down. We contain more microbes than our own cells, without which we couldn't do what we do and be who we are. Big bacteria contain smaller bacteria. Bacteria can contain viruses, and large viruses can contain smaller viruses. As many process relational biologists have said, that the smallest unit of analysis in the living world is the relationship. In this spirit, we feel that at this time, that forming symbiotic relationships across disciplines can help us meet many of the pressing challenges that we face. If we look at the history of life, it becomes clear that crisis is a crucible for new symbiotic relationships. And I feel like at this time of many crises that interdisciplinarity is a superpower. And Matt and I are playing a small experiment here in different ways that might unfold. It all began when I attended Matt's course on Whitehead at Schumacher College, and I was engrossed. And one day I was walking back from the course, wrestling with some of these ideas, and it struck me in a second. I suddenly thought, hang on a sec, Whitehead's metaphysical schema sounds rather like a multi-dimensional fungal network growing from many tips, all connected to one another. And this realization really helped Whitehead's thinking make sense for me. It was a powerful moment. Another powerful moment, by the way, I don't know if any of you have tried this, Steve Reich's Music for 18 Musicians. If you haven't tried this, and I thoroughly recommend it. For me, it's a soundtrack to Whitehead's metaphysical schema. If you get into a receptive state and put on your Whiteheadian lens and listen to that piece of music, perhaps you'll see something of what I felt from that. Strongly recommended. But it also became clear to me, not only could fungal biology help me understand Whitehead, but the Whitehead could help me understand fungal biology. Fungal life is so strange. Fungal behaviors trick us out of many of the presuppositions that we use to organize our lives, our societies, our economies, our politics, our theologies. They trouble and corrode many of the categories that we often take for granted. Individuality, autonomy, intelligence, and many others. But fungi are precisely the kind of creature that we would expect to find within a process relational universe. And so, armed with this process relational thinking, fungal life stopped being so strange and actually became coherent and to be expected, and really helped me do my fungal biology. Of course, all life is what we'd expect to see with a process relational lens, but I think fungi make it very clear, as I'll go on to say. So fungi are a kingdom of life. This is as broad and busy a category as animals or plants. But when we think of fungi, we normally think of mushrooms. But mushrooms are just the reproductive structures of fungi, the place where they produce spores. Most fungi live most of their lives not as mushrooms, but as branching, fusing networks of tubular cells. And these networks are called mycelial networks. Mycelial networks are how fungi feed. Animals tend to find food in the world and put it inside their bodies. Fungi do it the other way around and put their bodies inside their food. Mycelial networks are a very effective way to do so. Growing from growing tips, these networks burrow into their surroundings and digest their surroundings, absorb them and shuttle them around their rambling networks of bodies. Mycelium is extraordinary stuff. If you teased apart the mycelium in a healthy teaspoon of soil, it would stretch anywhere from 100 meters to 10 kilometers. Mycelium is ecological connective tissue, a living seam by which much of the living world is woven into relation. Fungal mycelium strings itself between plants, winds its way between plant cells in their leaves and in their shoots. You'll find fungal mycelium in and around animal bodies, both alive and dead, holding together the soil. Take away the mycelium and the soil would wash away, but there wouldn't be any soil in the first place because soil is a product of mycelial activity. Alexander von Humboldt had a wonderful line. He described the living world as a net-like entangled fabric. And in my mind, fungal mycelium make this net and fabric real. So I want to rehearse the process by which a mycelial network might form. And I was hoping that it might be possible. That's good? Okay. Great, okay, so we don't need to play it just yet. So we start with a spore. And a spore would germinate into a single fungal cell. You can see 5 fungal cells there. They're called hyphae. They are tubular in structure, and they grow from their tips. They grow by getting longer. They prolong themselves. New material is laid down at their tips, and when that material has been laid down, it becomes part of the tube and does no longer grow. The fungal tips are the parts of the fungi that do the most. They are the part of the fungi that are most active. So fungal cells are streams of embodiment guided by their tips. Maybe you could play this video. I think of these tips, these fungal growing tips, as rather like actual occasions. So fungal cells grow out of their relation to their past. But fungal cells, hyphae, they don't stay single for long. They branch and they fuse into the anarchic filigree of mycelium. The growing tips multiply into novel togetherness. Could we play the next video? Thank you. So note the branching and the fusing. So in this state, fungi are able to explore their surroundings. I remember this is how they feed. This is a kind of appetite in bodily form. They're seeking, we can only presume, in seeking food, ever more intense satisfaction of their appetites. Their behavior is really astonishing. They're maze dwellers. They live in the cluttered obstacle course of the soil. And people have tested them with little microscopic mazes. And you watch the fungal hypha enter the maze, and it does strange things there. When presented with a forked path, it doesn't have to choose one or the other. It just branches and takes both routes. In doing so, it's able to find, after a while, the shortest path between entrance and exit. But in watching this behavior, as you watch this video, it's difficult to work out whether this organism is singular, one single interconnected network, or is it plural? Is it a multitude of hyphal tips? And of course, it's both. And I think it's both in a very astonishing way. So these are webs of becoming. And mycelial networks reflect the cumulative character of time. They're, in a sense, portraits of time, cartographical representations of a fungus's recent history. They leave behind them a trail of their past, which enables their present. And they're highly indeterminate. No two mycelial networks are the same. You could take 2 fragments of a single fungal culture and grow them, and they would form quite different networks depending on where they were growing. They decant themselves into their surroundings. They're sort of inseparable from their surroundings. It's possible to ask what shape mycelium is without also asking where it happens to be growing and with whom it happens to be growing. There's no point at which a mycelial network can be said to be fully grown. These are bodies without body plans. Can we play the next video? Yes. So these are all sped up, by the way. And can we play the next one as well? So this is a fungus devouring an orange. Look at the intensity of that satisfaction. Unbelievable. It's going to start sporulating. There we go. Great. So we can just leave the videos for the moment. Thank you. Mycelial networks are sensitive bodies. They are bathed in rich fields of sensory information. They're sensitive to light, to any number of chemicals, to acidity, pressure, temperature, and they're able to integrate these data streams without having a brain to do so. They integrate these data streams at their growing tips. Each growing tip is somehow informed by what's going on in every other growing tip. The growing tips are all connected in a single network, and yet they're making locally suitable decisions based on what's around them and the many possibilities that they face. The growing front of mycelial networks scour instabilities in search of new niches, and indeed, they create niches, they create environments. Their decomposition gives rise to soil. They create many different types of environment. They create the space in which we live. Fungal decomposition of wood. Without fungal decomposition of wood, we would be buried kilometers deep in the bodies of animals and plants. So we live and breathe in the space that fungal activity leaves behind, another way that they create environments. And they relate to other organisms in astonishing ways. Closest to my heart are the fungi that form symbiotic relationships with plants. Almost all plants depend on fungi that live in and around their roots. The fungi are expert foragers in the cluttered wild west of the soil. They can forage for mineral nutrients, which they absorb, transport through their bodies, and exchange with plants. The plants can give the fungi access to energy-containing carbon compounds like sugars and fats they've produced in photosynthesis. This exchange is prolific. It was only with the help of fungi that the ancestors of plants were able to make it onto the land about 500 million years ago. It's a foundational relationship in the whole terrestrial biosphere, and it continues to this day. And watching it happen is quite amazing. A fungus might germinate in the soil. A plant root is growing in the soil. The plant root releases plumes of volatile chemicals which act as a lure for the fungus. The fungus grows towards this lure, releasing in turn chemicals which act as a lure to the plant root. They both change their whole developmental procedures. They can influence each other's development by producing hormones that act on each other. And they come together in a clasp, a generative clasp that is constantly negotiated between them and rehearses a foundational moment in the history of all life. A fungal network, after this relationship is formed, might find itself strung between the roots of tens of plants over tens of meters, engaged in very different metabolic activities in different parts of its network, engaged in uncountably large numbers of trading decisions with different plant roots in an ongoing processual way. So why bother looking for organic instances of Whitehead's schemas? First, as happened to me, fungi can, I think, help to communicate otherwise quite abstract ideas that we find in Whitehead's thought. They literally ground our discussion. Fungi they create the ground that we walk on, and they are very much, metabolically speaking, the ground of our being. Much of the stuff, much of the matter in your body will have passed through a mycorrhizal fungal network on its way to you. So, can these fungi help us talk about difficult ideas? I think so. They certainly have helped me. But perhaps there's more than that. Could fungal dynamics help illuminate some of the outstanding questions that we find in Whitehead's thought? Could this be a site of experience that might inform metaphysical work? I'm not sure. This is a real question. But it's interesting that the earliest evidence for mycelium dates from 2.4 billion years ago in the form of fossils, which are puzzling fossils for people because they occur long before multicellularity is supposed to have arisen, and long before fungi are supposed to have evolved. But they are, to this date, the earliest gesture towards multicellular life that we have on record. Could this tell us something about the nature of reality? And also, perhaps fungi can help generate useful metaphors that can do useful work for us, help us to see in new ways, feel in new ways, and explore in new ways. So we're excited. We're excited about the ways that fungi might lure us into returning process relational thinking to the biological sciences, displacing a reductive, mechanistic, metaphysical schema that not only struggles to cope with the generative unruliness of the living world, but also renders the universe needlessly dull. Thank you.